My name's Clayton Wellwood, and I'm the leader of the BC Libertarian Party. And our annual general meeting was this weekend, so if you didn't manage to make it, this is my report on the year that has been for the party and what's coming up for the next year. So the first part I want to touch on is how we've grown as an organization over the past year, which has been truly impressive. So if we look at membership, which I think is one of the main metrics we need to look at as a political party, we grew from 50 members a year ago to 150 now, which is just great because every member is of huge value to us, and we've had a good turnout at this AGM of many of our members. On social media, our Facebook reach has grown a lot. We had maybe a dozen views on our page per day going back a year. We peaked at about 7,000 a day in the week before the election, and we've sort of leveled out in over the last 3 months with about 1,000 views per day. So it's going very well. And Twitter, likewise, we went from not having a Twitter account a year ago to we've got 219 followers as of today. Our mailing list has grown as well from 200 to 350. And our website, we just started tracking visitors at the beginning of this month. But we've had already 219 unique visitors, and most of those are Canadian, 90%, a number from the US as well, and surprisingly a few from other places around the world, UK, Germany, West Africa, and Latin America. So another way I want to look at how we've grown is in terms of the number of events that we've done. So we've done barbecues. We did one last year. This year we managed to do 4, including one in Victoria. One here that we had in Vancouver at Trout Lake. Tim Moen, the leader of the Federal Libertarian Party, was able to join us for that, and that drew 40 plus people. We've done a whole bunch of pub nights and little meetups at coffee shops and other places. We didn't do any of these last year. This year we did 21. And in terms of major events, our only one last year was the convention that we had last October. This year we've done 3. We did a Liberty workshop in February where we had Michael Pickens and Michael Scott up from the US to give us their knowledge in terms of how to run an effective libertarian campaign. We also had many of our candidates for the 2017 BC election giving short speeches there. We did a comedy night in Kelowna, which was the first time we experimented with something like that. So Dave Kopp is our contact up there, and he arranged the whole thing with starting off with a debate. Don Wilson and I talked about the state of free speech in Canada, and then it was followed up by a comedy show with some local comics. And of course, we've got our AGM this weekend. So we can also look at election participation and the results that we had. This is comparing the 2013 general election to the one we had in May this year. So last election we ran just 8 candidates. This year we ran 30, which is a huge jump and far in excess of anything we'd managed to do previously in terms of number of candidates. We can also look at, and I think that this is a major metric of success, is just the number of voters that got to see the word libertarian on their ballot, because we had candidates in 30 different electoral districts. So that's up from about 160,000 in 2013 to over 600,000 this election. In terms of actual votes that we got, we had in 2013 just over 2,050, and we completely blew that out of the water this time with 7,838. So not where we should be. That's still only 0.4% of the total votes cast in the province, although it works out to an average of 1% in the ridings where we had candidates. and some great performances by individual candidates there as well. So Alex Joel in Langley East, he got 448 votes, so that was the top in terms of number of votes. And in terms of highest share of the vote, that was John Rempel up in Nechako Lakes with 4.5% of the vote. So excellent job by those guys and all of our candidates who came out and attended so many events and put up a lot of signs that people would have seen as well. So in terms of that public exposure, there's a few other things that are noteworthy. So one was during the actual coverage on election night, we had our own bar graph for a little while tracking our results on CBC's website. We had, there was a 420 event, so this is of course April 20th. Huge one in Vancouver, attended by over 30,000 people. We had a strong presence there. We had a booth. We handed out about 2,000 little stickers that said "Stop the Arrests." Keith Komar, one of our candidates and directors, he got up and on stage and gave a speech to the, I don't know, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people that were there at the time. This was broadcast worldwide as well. We also had some interviews, myself and some of the other candidates. So the main one of those was on CKNW Steel and Direct Show, popular afternoon talk radio show here in Vancouver. We also had election ads. So these are the free ones that CBC allows us to do. So we had a few radio ads and one TV ad. We also had, of course, the candidates participating in many all-candidates meetings and other kinds of events during their campaigns. And we had exposure through the two kind of media projects that two of our members have. So Josh Deffler, our deputy leader, runs a cable access TV show called Freedom Free for All. It's a weekly show every Tuesday night on public TV, Shaw TV in Victoria. So we had myself and many other candidates featured on that show. Also, Kyle McCormick, one of our directors, so he runs a podcast, just started this year, up to 23 or 24 episodes by now. So it's called the New Liberty Podcast, and so he's had myself and many of our candidates on there talking about their campaigns. So that's been great exposure and a much needed addition to the Liberty scene here in Western Canada. So great exposure, that's really grown over the past year. We've also made a lot of organizational improvements. So with this kind of thing, we've really scaled ourselves up and professionalized ourselves as an organization. And one of the key things there is now we've got a modern website. Our previous one was awful. Now we've got something that is not super slick, but at least what you'd expect of a decent-sized political party. Thanks very much to Kyle McCormick for all his work in setting that up and maintaining it. So we've got a blog on there with, we'd like to have more activity there, but we're doing, a couple of posts a month sort of thing. We've got an events page. We've got contact forms. We've got fillable online membership form. We've got payment processing for membership dues and donations. So all the features you'd expect of a modern website. We've also got regular emails going out to our mailing list a couple times a month, using MailChimp for that, just to give people updates on the events going on and other news of the party. We've got merchandise now, so we've got t-shirts, we've got hats, we've got buttons, we've got flyers, we've got beach balls, all sorts of stuff that we will be out there selling or giving away at the events that we attend. And we've also set up some coordinator positions. So the idea here was to have another way that people can get involved in the party, not just as sitting on the board or as leaders or candidates, but some ongoing volunteer commitments. So we set up several positions. So we've got Don Wilson as our outreach coordinator. We've got Ron Morgan and Brent Ingberg as our membership and constituency association coordinators. We've got Brian Pinsky as our events coordinator, Matt Stiles as our policy coordinator, Josiah Huco as campaign strategy coordinator, and Stan Grishin as our IT coordinator. So we still haven't found anyone for the fundraising coordinator, so if you're interested in that position, please get in touch with us. It's a very important role to keep our war chest well stocked. So that's kind of the year in review in terms of what we've managed to accomplish and how we've grown. So I want to just touch on a little bit what the year ahead looks like. So we've got a couple of big events coming up. One is just happening a week from now, the Students for Liberty Regional Conference for Western Canada, which is going to be taking place at the Vancouver Convention Centre on November 4th. So if you haven't got your tickets already for that, this will be the biggest liberty event that our movement here in Western Canada has ever seen, I'm guessing. With a venue like that, we could have several hundred people, especially with high-profile speakers like Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein, who's the professor at Evergreen College down in Olympia, Washington, who stood up against the No Whites on Campus Day. So very interested to hear what he has to say. There's a lineup of other speakers as well, including myself. So BC Libertarian Party will be there. We'll have a table there with t-shirts and hats and so on. So hope to see you there. We've also got, it hasn't been called yet, but it should be by the end of the year or very early in 2018, a by-election in Kelowna. So Christy Clark has stepped down from her seat. We're waiting for John Horgan to call that by-election, and we've got our candidate Kyle Geranazzo all lined up to run in that race once it's called. So those are the two things in the next few months that are coming up. But I also just want to talk generally about the vision for the party. So where are we going? Who do we need to attract to continue to grow and gain relevance in BC? So in terms of the general picture stuff that's gone on in the last few months, I want to talk about. So one thing there is we're into good economic times. So that's nice. But, you know, the good economic times are really going in Vancouver and the urban areas, but a lot of rural BC is kind of still left out of this. You know, resource development sector is not really moving along as we think it should be. We hope that that there can be more job opportunities for people in the interior of BC. So I think that this is an opportunity for us as a party to appeal to those working class people in the interior. Let them know that we're not about to enforce an agenda on them like, you know, the other parties with their, you know, saying, oh no, we don't want to have a pipeline here, even though it would provide many jobs throughout the province, that sort of thing. Another aspect of the current economic climate is that even though times are good, there's been no tax cuts either by the provincial or federal government, and there's in fact been quite large spending increases. So this means, you know, increases to the debt down the road, and I think that this is probably rather concerning to many people, but especially the kind of urban middle class fiscal conservatives. So this is a group that we really need to be appealing to. I think that they can just see that, you know, with the NDP and Greens in power provincially and Trudeau's Liberals federally, that you know, this should be the time to engage in some fiscal sensibility, and they're just not doing it, and that's could really become painful a few years down the road when the economy turns back to a recession, as we know that it will. With we won't get into business cycle stuff, but we know the government's at fault there. So What else is going on in Canada, in BC? Well, we've got marijuana legalization coming by July 1st, 2018. Okay, yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag there. This licensed producer model that the feds seem to favor, and that Ontario, and we don't know what BC is going to do, but they're definitely leaning that way. The licensed producer model, rather than having a true free market in terms of production, is of course a new flavor of crony capitalism that the big players in that industry and the government are looking to introduce. Of course, taxation on the sales. Will there be additional taxes? Probably. That's definitely the way BC is leaning, which is unfortunate. And in terms of this, conditions that the feds have added for, the criminal side of how they're legalizing it, which is a bit of a contradiction in terms. But so one thing that they've implemented is this 4 plants rule. So if you're growing your own weed, you can't grow more than 4 plants. So this presents some issues in terms of the enforcement. How do you enforce a 4-plant rule? Well, it seems like a snooping nanny state approach. I don't know what they're going to do. Send around inspectors, leave it to citizens to rat their neighbors out. I don't know, but it is an potential invasion of privacy, at least. And another aspect that hasn't really come up in the popular discussion on this thing is civil asset forfeiture. So BC has a civil asset forfeiture office, and one of the main things it does is busting grow-ops, illegal grow-ops, right? So when it becomes legal, what's going to happen with that? I would like to see that office shut down completely. It is a violation of civil liberties to, be able to just seize property without conviction of a crime. So I would like to see that go out the window entirely, and I hope that libertarians will advocate for that. Another big development we've seen promised pre-election and delivered post-election is the ban on corporate union donations. Well, we sure got hoodwinked there by the Greens and the NDP. They just talked about corporate and union donations, but in fact they brought in a whole bunch of other crap with it, including a $1,200 cap on individual donations, and a whole system of taxpayer-funded subsidies, which of course are tilted in favor of the big parties who can get a large share of the vote. And me personally, I'm just hugely in opposition to this. I just think it's so morally wrong to compel people to pay through the tax system for political ideas that they do not support. But this does give us an opportunity, I suppose, to forge alliances with other small parties, and we've done that in terms of signing on to a letter that was penned by the leader of your political party. And we look for other opportunities to, form coalitions and work together with smaller parties in terms of getting this heinous donation funding law repealed. Okay, who else do we need to reach out to? Well, there's a number of other groups that I think we haven't done a good enough job of appealing to, and that I'm hoping that we as a party can reach out to more over the coming years. One is actually libertarians. I think we've done a great job of appealing to libertarians, but I think there's a lot more work to be done. Still, I think there's many people in BC who don't know that there is a provincial libertarian party. So we need to do more to reach out to them, especially outside of Metro Vancouver. And I think that there's not enough cooperation yet with the Libertarian Party of Canada. I think that we can sure do a lot more in terms of collaborating with them on events, on trying to identify candidates and that sort of thing. There's also a lot of libertarians who maybe they know we exist, but don't vote, think that voting is wrong, or think that it's pointless or useless. So I don't want to, knock myself out trying to change these people's mind, but I think maybe if we can, if they could see some of the, the stats that I gave in terms of the impact that running candidates in an election can have in terms of raising the profile of libertarian ideas, maybe they would be more on side in terms of helping us out, volunteering, or even voting for us. So, another group of people that we haven't actually really talked about to date, as far as I'm aware, in terms of appealing to much, is First Nations. Now, I think that they're actually natural allies of ours, but there's a big cultural gap there. And I think that it would take some work in terms of showing how our interests are aligned as libertarians and as First Nations people. So where I think they're aligned is that I think that they are the cultural group that is most oppressed by the state in Canada, and also the one that is least convinced of the state's legitimacy. They have their own tradition and their own history of governance, which is very different from the large bureaucratic nation state that was imposed on them when the European colonists came here. So I also think that they are a group of people who can benefit most from private property rights. They have much experience on reserves in Canada with collectivist property rights, and that has kept most of them in poverty. So I think that we can make that case, and I think that looking at First Nations that have liberalized a little bit, haven't just relied on government transfers for wealth generation. You look at the Soyuz band. They've done incredible things. So I want to look more at these case studies of economic success on reserves and among First Nations people, and be able to talk about that as a way that, to demonstrate that these ideas of economic liberties, private property rights can really work for any cultural group to make them more economically well off. And the last point I want to say about First Nations is that they have more latitude to experiment with different models of governance, which I think should be of interest for libertarians. We're not going to get to the stateless society right away, so there needs to be incremental progress towards that. And I think that the scope that First Nations have to, through the treaty process, to be able to set up some degree of self-government, that provides some hope. I would love to see that further liberalized. I mean, they're still, very much limited by the Indian Act and in terms of the amount of experimentation that they can do in terms of governance. But we hope that really one day that act will be repealed, and I could just see huge potential in terms of experimenting with different types of governments, especially at the local level. Okay, another group I want to talk about: young people who have not been fully indoctrinated into socialism. And I think that there are many of them out there, and I think that they consider their social justice warrior peers to be very annoying, and perhaps they identify as conservatives. Maybe they don't, because they're more socially liberal, and I think that that's a big opportunity for us, because I don't know if the BC Liberals or the BC Conservative Party would be very attractive to them. I think that the BC Libertarian Party could be attractive to them, especially if we're able to scale up and professionalize our messaging a little bit more. I also think that these young people, they consider consumer choice to be a right, and they're very much in favor of things like the sharing economy. I think that we can talk to them on these sorts of policy issues. I think we have a lot to offer. I also think that they see the generational unfairness in the large public debts that governments are accumulating, and also in terms of the housing policies that privilege current owners and make it really unaffordable for them to get a toehold in the property market. So there's one other group I want to mention here, the politically unaffiliated. So these are people who basically think that all of the Borg parties, so the blue, the orange, green, red parties are corrupt. You know, they don't really want to have anything to do with them. I think of these mostly as older voters who have been around long enough to just see that that these politicians, they don't deliver on their promises. They don't really represent their constituents very well. So these people, they want a representative in office who is unbiased, who isn't whipped by their party when it comes to voting in the legislature, and someone who will really represent local interests. And I think that we can be that party. We need to think, though, in terms of not being the people who have the right set of policy ideas to implement, but just the people as candidates when we go out and ask for people's vote, the ones who are really willing to listen to people and really willing to act as the protector of their liberties from predation by government when, if and when we are elected and go into government. So I think that we can position ourselves as their defenders and really ones who will listen, who will consult, and as hard as it is to bring, to synthesize the ideas of many people, it's impossible in many cases. But if we can represent the idea that everybody has the right to pursue their own good according to how they see it, I think that we can make a lot of progress with this group of people. So just to kind of wrap things up here, what we need to keep in mind in terms of making political change, we don't need majorities. We don't need 50+% of the population to agree with our ideas and endorse us in order to make change. We only need about 5 or 10%. If you look historically, that's what political movements have needed. But they have to be 5 or 10% of people who are, who understand the principles they're fighting for and are committed to taking action to advance those principles. Look at the communists in the early 20th century. They weren't that many. The Bolsheviks were a tiny, 5% of the population, but they managed to capture the apparatus of the state and advance their agenda over the heads of everybody else. Now, I'm not saying that we want to impose our ideas on people in the way that the Bolsheviks did. What I'm saying is that passion among a small minority can be enough to trigger cultural acceptance broadly in a society of new ideas. And we can be the catalyst, but we have to be passionate and we have to be willing to fight for those ideas. So in terms of how we promote our ideas, our speaker, Robin Kerner, will be saying more about that. He's really the expert in this area, and he's got tons of great advice. So I won't get into that, but let me just say that we need to think about why we're advancing liberty. As it's not that we have all the right answers or that we're smarter and we've figured out the perfect political system. We're in favor of the libertarian principles because we know that they are the best in terms of advancing human happiness and prosperity. And I think that if we can be friendly, magnanimous, like Walter Block talks about Murray Rothbard's Band of Merry Men. So he was in Murray's Band of Merry Men, and sort of being a jolly libertarian, advancing the ideas of liberty with a smile on your face, with a friendly handshake, with a willingness to listen to the concerns of regular people. I think that if we could take this sort of approach, we've got huge potential. So I just want to give you some practical ideas about how you can get involved with the BC Libertarian Party and in the liberty movement in order to really make some change over the coming years. So one way is to start a constituency association. So we want to get liberty happening at a local level. So if you want to be president and start a constituency association, you just need one other person. To do that, you can form that as an official entity within the BC Libertarian Party. You can also organize events. We would love to have more events. We would love to have, pub nights and coffee shop meetups and even larger, more creative events like the Kelowna Comedy Night that we did. We would love to have that happening throughout Metro Vancouver and in other communities across the province. Give people an opportunity to come out, to meet us, to become familiar with our ideas, to just talk about things. Face-to-face communication is so important. We can do a lot on social media, but that face-to-face, that human touch is so important in terms of, building a movement and having those bonds with other human beings that give us the strength to fight for what we believe in. You can also volunteer for the party. Like I said, we have a number of coordinators. We're still looking for a fundraising coordinator, or if there's another coordinator position that you think the party is in need of to focus on a specific area, let me know. Make your pitch. We're open to expanding this. You can also run for the board of directors. So we'd love to have you sit on our board and steer the ship of the party through the troubled waters as they sometimes are. You can also, like I mentioned, social media. That's great as well. So if you want to share our posts on our Facebook page or retweet our Twitter posts, please feel free to do so. Every bit helps. Or if you want to do one better, write a blog post for our website. We always need more content there. We need your ideas on policy, especially. A blog is a great place to kind of get into detail about these policy areas that we just don't have the space to cover in a quick tweet or Facebook post. You could sit on one of our policy committees, actually. We're hoping to get those started up as we move towards the next election. We want to refine our policy so that we've got a good base to draw a platform from when the next election's called. So, if you have expertise or knowledge or just interest and willingness to research in a given area, whether it's healthcare or education or taxes or what have you, please let us know. We'd love to have you sitting on one of these committees or chairing it. You can be a candidate. We always need more candidates. We want to run a full slate in the next election. So that's 87 candidates. If we can't do that, we want to get as close as we can. So it could still be 4 years to the next election, though we don't know. So if you're up for it, just send an email or go to our website. There's a page for expressing your interest as a candidate. Just let us know. So just in general, I think that there's a lot that you can do. Maybe just if you just took a couple hours off of social media each week and devoted it to, getting out volunteering in your community or, going to Toastmasters or something like that. Just meeting people, networking, developing your skills, whether it's in public speaking or networking or what have you. All of that helps. We want a legion of ambassadors for liberty in this province, and there's so much that you can do. Don't be held back by any of my suggestions. Just anytime you have an idea about something that will advance liberty, I just encourage you to go for it. Be an entrepreneur. This is very much a grassroots, bottom-up movement. Don't wait for instruction from the top down. If you've got an idea, just run with it. Inspire people. Ask for help. There's so much room for us to grow. We can have such a greater impact than what we're having now. But yeah, we need that commitment and that drive to start things up and to see them through. So thanks very much. This has been my report on the year past and the year upcoming for the BC Libertarian Party. Thanks very much.